Hey, everybody, this is Chris Dortch, the festival director of the Chattanooga Film Festival, and it is an honor today to be here to talk with the filmmakers and the star of one of our favorite documentaries, honestly, of the year, but one of our very favorite things that we're getting to show, which is a film called Bob Morgan's Just Going to Tell Some Stories. And I'm here today with Bob Morgan himself, as well as co-directors Grayson Tyler Johnson and Tom Marksbury. And gentlemen, first of all, allow me to just blow a bunch of smoke up your ass about what an incredible piece of work this was. And Bob, how fascinating it was to get to take a tour through your world guided by you, which honestly felt like something of a gift. And to kind of kick us off, I'd love to know how this project sort of first came to be. Grayson, were you aware of Bob and brought Tom in? Like, what's the origin story here?
Yeah, the exact opposite, actually. Tom, I'll let you you take it away.
That's great.
Well, I've known Bob for 40 years and always thought that he would make a great subject for a one-man documentary, which is a hard subgenre to accomplish. And Grayson has become an accomplished filmmaker, but I've known him since he was in my classes at UK.
That's awesome. Love hearing that.
So there's this sort of part of the story we're trying to tell with Bob is how he is this link to the other generations and how, not just queerness, but creativity in a more general way is something that gets handed down like a baton in a relay race. And so I'm glad to have, speaking of queerness, I'm glad to have my baton handed down to Grayson, I suppose.
It needs to be said that this was planned to just be a short little experimental film. It was never planned to be a feature-length movie. It just sort of kept evolving. And
honestly, yeah, if this were to become a miniseries and there were sequels as well, I would be personally completely cool with that. And that kind of leads me to wonder, how much footage did you guys shoot and carve this out of the clay of?
Yeah, well, we shot over 3 days in the wintertime of 2021, I think. Tom, I think that's right.
Yeah.
And then we got a lot of the stories during that time, like the bulk of the stories. And then I sat down to cut it, and we had like a little 20-minute something there, but there was so much left out.
I think it was 35 minutes.
Right. Yeah, okay, yeah.
That was an interesting cut on its own, but a completely different thing.
And we made the decision to go back during the summer of 22 and shoot another 3 days to get the B-roll to cover. And then we ended up with a lot more, just being there for 3 days. So it was 2 3-day shoots.
Is there anything that didn't make the final cut that you wish had, or is it kind of all there on screen?
I'd like to go on record as saying I left out entire decades that I didn't even talk about.
I'm curious about those lost years. Yeah.
Oh, I mean, like, the hitchhiking to Haight-Ashbury for the Summer of Love, and spending time with William Burroughs in the bunker in New York and stuff like that. That I was trying to talk about the story of making that body of work. And so I tried to stay away from stories that were sensational stories that were fun and all that, but didn't really weave into how I go about just taking junk and trying to make it into some meaningful cultural artifact.
For us, that's a huge part of our identity as the Chattanooga Film Festival as well, which is, combing what some people might think of as the trash and finding things that we think are curiosities or that have this incredible value to them, and, kind of putting that into context for people. So your entire style of creating art, Bob, is something it resonates with me greatly. And I also have to give you guys credit. This might have my all-time favorite closing shot from any documentary. documentary, which almost feels like a perfect metaphor for the whole piece. You have the trash can with the flowers and everything.
I'm so glad you noticed that. I love the way
I adore that shot. And I really loved you talking about your process. And I'm curious, Tom, you mentioned, it sounds like from the outset, this was never intended to be anything but Bob as our tour guide here. You guys weren't ever set to interview anyone else or anything like that. This was, I'm a big fan of a documentary called Stephen Tobolowsky's Birthday Party, which is, the actor Stephen Tobolowsky telling a million terrific stories. And if anyone else had been featured in that film, I don't think we would have gotten as clear a picture of who Stephen is. And it feels that way with you, Bob. Even hearing, about your influences, and I know this is more me just spawning with praise than a question, but I'm curious. You talked about Henry Faulkner, and of course, Sweet Evening Breeze. Were there any other heroic or influential figures that you didn't get to mention, or you mentioned Burroughs in the bunker? I'm curious. Yeah.
Well, that was a whole big curious story. I was so adventuresome when I was in high school. I thought of nothing to hitchhiking to New York, and I heard you could walk in the factory and just visit. And so I just got the address and hitchhiked to New York. And I used to do stuff like that. And I guess, being raised partially by Henry Faulkner, I thought nothing of doing crazy. It was a different world in those days, And
I think the thing I miss the most there is the Key West connection, Palm Beach, Key West, and
we didn't get to go into that too much because the literary underground in Key West that I grew up in with. I mean, Henry had been taken off the beach as an orphan by Bertolt Brecht and his family in Key West, And that's pretty amazing. When I first met Henry, I had no idea who Bertolt Brecht was, but that's like some heavy shit. He was in the mental hospital with Ezra Pound, and so I had all kinds of influences like that, that as a young teenager that seemed normal in my little world, and but mainly, my family told stories. My grandmother told stories, and we all had our favorite stories. And when we'd get together, we'd have our grandmother tell the stories. And as she got older and senile, she couldn't remember the stories, and I would correct everybody and retell the stories. So I grew up with the importance of getting the story right, and if people aren't interested in hearing the story, then you fucking failed. So I still maintain that philosophy that
which Bob was just talking about before we started the interview, and he was very flexible on most things, incredibly flexible. But on repeating a story or telling a story before he was ready to, he was an absolute Nazi about that. It had to be a certain way, and he had to be able to deliver it the way he wanted it to.
And Grayson didn't know any of these stories, so I was really telling him these stories for the first time, which makes them, there's an authenticity to telling somebody a story rather than reading a script, that I think comes across, it has more honesty and emotional impact.
There's no doubt of that. And I'm curious, if being so raw and so open and being such an open book, Bob, if knowing that this film was going to be made about you was intimidating,
Believe you me, the story was still heavily censored. So, but there are some, I think, pretty open, raw parts of the conversation, but we could have gone deeper. And I'm not sure if it needed to, but
it feels like so. Oh, go ahead.
What was so important to me was I didn't know what was going to be done with the footage and how it was going to be strung together. I was sort of trying to tell the story from the beginning, but that never really works. You go down all these rabbit holes, but then I was worried what Grayson and Tom would see and how they would thread it together.
I feel like the structure of the documentary is a really fascinating and great one, because it really does evolve from being, this personal tour through your home, Bob, to, you talking about Henry and really giving us this sense of what it was like, being part of the queer community in the South at a time, and obviously it's though we can talk about the state of the world now, it's obviously a strange thing to be part of the queer community in the South now, but you had really become this caretaker of so many people in the later part of your life too, that it really felt like, as the film progressed, these layers and layers of the story, and even, spending so much time talking about, the HIV era, the height of the AIDS epidemic. I'm curious if that structure was something Tom and Grayson, you guys kind of found as you went, or did you always intend to sort of expand the scope of Bob's story as the film went along?
I want Grayson to speak to the structure. He gets the credit there.
Yeah, you're our cinematographer and editor. I should point out as well. So a lot of hats on this project.
Yeah, well, the structure. So the very beginning of the film is the first time I ever met Bob. Like, I pressed record, and then that, we walk into his backyard as the movie opens. So I'm sort of, I used my getting to know Bob as a structure for the film, sort of, where we would, I wasn't sure. Maybe I was in the backyard of a crazy hoarder for the first, hour or two. I didn't know anything about Bob's, history or art or anything. So that was actually a gift, and it helped us. And it helped me sort of think about, like, okay, here was the realizations of me going through getting to know Bob. Maybe I'll use those as key points of expanding the structure of the film.
So
things like the Helm House, home of Mary Todd Lincoln, and all the Civil War, that all just, we weren't even sure we were going to go do that, and we were just literally wandering around, and I would just say, oh, here's the battles from the Civil War where she lost all her family members. None of that was really planned, but it just gave so many deep layers to the story, and the shots, the cinematography, I think, is so cool, because sometimes it's so cluttered and sometimes it's very austere, and it jumps back and forth and sort of jolts your senses a little bit sometimes.
I really felt that way, especially in the sequences where you're showing us your room, and how you go to sleep literally surrounded by your fears at night, which I have to say is such an inspiring concept that I feel like I kind of want to try it myself. It just I really appreciated how you guys put this thing together, and I also love that we really did get those full on rabbit holes is a term you used earlier, but I love getting those histories of Henry Faulkner and of Sweet Evening Breeze, and how much of that you knew just from the top of your head from your own life, Bob. It's really great to meet those figures through you, I find, and I'm curious. You mentioned that a lot of there were some things that might have been heavily censored, but do you feel like you got to kind of introduce those people in a way that did them justice, or they're yeah.
I mean, I tell people, I think I even say in the movie, my gay grandmother was a black transgender whose parents were born in slavery. There's
right.
Our movie right there, and but we don't even do that movie, I used to not think that was special, particularly. It was just the way I grew up, but now, with the establishment of the Faulkner Morgan Archive as the largest queer archive in the South, and we got $500,000 from the Mellon Foundation to really beef up our activism. And it was, I don't even think we were sure we were going to visit the archive and look at old photographs or anything. That just sort of came about too, And I can't emphasize how at ease we just sort of explored the whole thing,
I'm curious also, obviously you're a gentleman who doesn't like to throw very many things away. And whether it be the skull of a beloved Chihuahua or, all the incredible photographs you were taking.
All the good stuff.
I love all the good stuff. I mean, these are the things that to me are going to stand out to our audience and resonate with the folks that I know come to this festival. And we very much pride ourselves as being sort of a safe community for queerness and otherness, and regularly feature films by transgender filmmaker. To us, sort of, as I said before we started the Q&A here, kind of unbuckling the idea of the Bible Belt a bit is a big part of what we do. And that was another thing that I absolutely loved about getting to see your world, Bob. And I'm also blown away, and I should, not to digress too much, but the music that's put together. The film is really driven by so many interesting pieces of music. That you've got Josephine Baker in there. I'm curious how you assembled that as well, guys.
Yeah. Bob, do you want to talk about that?
No, I just said it'd be nice to have some Josephine Baker.
You did, yeah. So
that's great.
Yeah, because you mentioned that Sweet Evening Breeze or Henry Faulkner listened to Josephine Baker, right? Didn't you? Yeah. So I was like, okay, and I looked. It was that year that I was cutting it, that whole bit of music came into the public domain. So it was
that's awesome. I wondered about that. Yeah. I hope that there was some timeliness there.
Yeah. So I was like, okay, well that's settled. And then all the rest is just, Bob had mentioned that he was like, I was like, well, okay, well, what kind of music? We were just talking on set, like what kind of music should accompany this? And Bob said something like, oh, some outer space shit, weird theremin.
I love that outer space shit.
And Lexington, Kentucky, is like there's a big outer space theremin shit scene in Lexington. So I was like, well, maybe I can just make a big playlist of all my favorite artists from Lexington. And so everybody other than Josephine Baker is a local Lexington, Kentucky artist.
I'm glad to hear that. And I wondered, and obviously it's great to see your Susie and the Banshees shirt as well. And know obviously that, music is a big thing to you and part of your process as well. And I started to touch on this a second ago, but, being a gentleman who doesn't throw very many things away, was there anything archivally that you used in the film that you kind of had to dig for? Or was that something where between you, Bob, and the archive, that there were a lot of those materials already kind of around?
When we were talking about my mother's childhood in Eastern Kentucky, Grayson did a lot of digging around in archives to find photographs from that particular place and time that I don't know where he got stuff, but that really helped fill out some of that history. And but, and I had to deal with my family a little bit and showing and telling stories about my mother. But, I finally got family approval. We had to change one or two pictures. So that was about the first time I've ever really shown like personal family pictures and childhood pictures. But it all worked,
No, absolutely. And I mean, it really gives us such a window into your, early life to learning that, a family outing was your pop taking you guys to the mental institution to meet your mom, because the grounds were so beautiful. It may as well have been a public park. So, those are the sort of things that I think have to color who you are as a person. So it really, I don't feel like while I would have loved to see those moments in Haight-Ashbury and things like that, it really does feel like such a love letter to, Kentucky and to Lexington too. And I loved, of course, seeing the murals and all the things that you've brought to that town and how much weirdness you've helped, exist in Kentucky. It feels like you're, a
lot of that is just surviving.
I completely understand. A friend of our festival is Wayne White. And seeing the South through Wayne's lens is something that's meant a lot to me as a person who's grown up here. So it really was incredible to get to see Kentucky through yours.
The film won an award in San Francisco, too.
Rightly so. And we think there's going to be a lot.
Well, just culturally, there's an interesting symmetry to that. It feels like it all came full circle.
Absolutely. And I'm also, I bet you, as more people start to see this, you mentioned at one point in the film, Bob, that you think that there are more photographs of Sweet Evening Breeze out there that might, find their way to you eventually. I do hope that as more people see this, that a few more of those archival photographs start to fall your way a bit. I think that's really magical about it. I'm curious if there is enough footage, if you guys would ever consider, making a follow-up film or letting us spend a bit more time with Bob.
I can't imagine after 87 minutes of me going on in that one. We do, there's interesting parts where we're at the Pride Festival where it's just like total mayhem, but the rest of the time it's like just sort of one-on-one talking, and that was like, Grayson was shooting from the shoulder, like just as we went everywhere, I was mic'd and we were, I don't even think he put the camera on a tripod once during the whole filming. We might have, though. I didn't notice, but
I had to learn early on, as Tom mentioned, that the first few times we shot, Bob would start talking and I'm building the camera and I'm realizing like, this is what I need to be rolling on, and we couldn't get it again. Like a couple of times asked you to do it again and you looked at me like I had two heads. And so I had to learn to build the camera first before I even saw Bob and like be ready to go.
Well, I've worked with camera crews before where they have 15 people from Kentucky Educational Television all crowded, like 5 guys on the lights and shit, and what a pain in the ass,
Yeah.
You sit there and wait, and then they say, oh no, stop, we got to do it all over again. Like, oh my God,
Yeah, nothing to bake some authenticity out of you like a fucking room full of hot lights. So,
oh my God, yeah, and all that, editing and re-editing, and so it was literally, it wasn't even like we were making a movie. I didn't think.
For a visual artist, Bob and this is probably something that drew me to him. He has a very literary sensibility. I mean, we're talking about Tennessee Williams and Pound, and I mean, he really knows how to tell a story. And it's not just a talent, it's a religion, that these narratives get compounded and passed on and elaborated. And we're trying to come up with a title for the movie, and the one with the Grayson came up with that works in a million ways and is not nearly as simplistic as it sounds is Bob Morgan shows you his junk. And it sounds like a cheap laugh, but then the further you get into the film, you start realizing what all the layers of history and memory and creation, all those things mean. And the fact that he was such a good raconteur is what made me confident that he could hold that feature-length film together.
And it does, also explain how, I've never been a successful or accepted artist in the legitimate community. The world has shifted to me at my age. And,
right.
And so, I spent many, many years with like having virtually no ego or success in the art world, which I think, allows me a great deal of freedom. If you can survive long enough to, have that privilege. And
John Huston has a line in Chinatown. He says, politician, whores, and buildings get more respectable with old age.
Yeah. And
yeah, I'm curious if there's anything in the production that we haven't talked about that maybe you guys would like to talk about a bit, or if there's anything that you wished you'd had the ability to include, or anything along those lines.
I'd like to say my favorite scene in the movie is the tattered Bible blowing in the wind on the tombstone.
Love that very much, and love you being the cemetery tour guide as well.
Yeah, I mean, it meant a whole lot to me to go to that cemetery, and we were like, sort of like Oh, the part where we went to the church was really wild because we were literally calling churches and saying, "Can we come down and film in your church?" No, hang up.
I saw a few in the thank you, so you must have got a
So
couple.
we literally called the church, and the guy at the desk said, "If you come down in the next 20 minutes, you can film here." We jumped in the car, ran down to the church, ran in, and it was set up for a wedding.
No! So really, 20 minutes. That wasn't just an arbitrary.
We went right in and started filming in the church. We had 20 minutes to film till this guy was not at the desk any longer. So it was like, I mean, you'd have thought we'd have, booked and reserved the church months in advance and had all kinds of planning. It was like, it was totally ridiculous.
I do wish I had gotten to see you crash a wedding as part of the film, but
they had the candles all set up with the bows on them and everything down the aisle, and we were like, "Oh my God, it's set up for a wedding. How could it be more perfect?"
Yeah, those ladies were pissed at us. You remember?
I thought somebody at the Q&A here in Lexington would say, "That's not a Catholic church. That's Christ Church Episcopal," but nobody mentioned that. And I thought we were going to have to say, "Well, we know, we just fudged it."
Man, oh man. Well, guys, I'm so excited for our audience to discover this film this week. And I do know that we do set up a Discord server here where your film will have a channel. And as people discover the film through the week, they'll have an opportunity to kind of leave comments and questions for you there too. And I just have to believe that it's going to be a giant love fest because you are all very much our, the bread and butter of our demographic here. Yours is a name that I think is going to mean a hell of a lot to a lot of our fans, Bob. So again, thank you all for making this movie and for giving us the opportunity to share it. It really does mean the world, and it's going to be a blast to watch our audience experience it. And unless there's anything else that you guys would like to talk about, we'll let you get back onto your days.
Let Grayson sign off here.
Yeah.
Oh, just appreciate you guys, giving us a platform. The Chattanooga Festival is the best, man. Chattanooga, the town, it's awesome.
We'll make sure you get a check and a decorative fruit basket for saying that, of course,
Yeah.
as is our tradition. But yeah, thank you, Grayson.
I appreciate you guys.